So now let's find the zeros and factor this long polynomial. So we're going to begin by looking at this number and the number in front of our leading term, which is a 1, and we are going to factor both of them. Now this one, of course, factors is positive and negative 1. That's the only thing that goes into 1, which makes this a much easier process. All right, now 96 though, lots of things go into 96. So let's see. 1 goes into it, 2 goes into it, 3 goes into it. I don't know, does 4 go into it? Let's see. Yep, 4 goes into it. 6 goes into it. I'm guessing that maybe 8 does, but let's see. 8 does go into it. 12 goes into it. 24 goes into it. 48, I believe, goes into it. And let me make my 24 look like it's not a 29. Still kind of looks like 29. But 48 goes into it. And finally, 96 goes into it. I'm wondering if I missed one. Did I miss maybe 36? No, 36 doesn't go. Okay. So we've got all of these, and we have to take them and put them over these. Well, there's just a 1 there, so when we put all of these over 1, we just get all of these. So our possible zeros to choose from is a pretty long list. Oops. When it gets too sensitive, it does that. All right, so we have positive and negative 1, positive and negative 2, positive and negative 3. And for the sake of expediency, I'm not going to keep writing my positive and negative, but let's remember that all of them are positive and negative. So we have this entire list of everything that goes into the 96. Now on a test, as I said before in the last video, it's going to be one of the first ones you try. So don't start with the back side, start with the front. All right, so let's start with a positive 1, and let's divide it into 1, negative 2, negative 28, 8, 96. And again, I'll make my line, and I'll bring the 1 down. And let's multiply and add, multiply and add, multiply and add. So 1 times 1 is 1. Add, we get negative 1. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Add, we get negative 29. 1 times negative 29 is negative 29. Add, we get negative 21. And then 1 times negative 21 is negative 21. And we can kind of stop at this point when we see these don't add to 0. This is not it. So let's go to negative 1 and do our synthetic division again. So negative 1 into 1, negative 2, negative 28, 896. Again, bring down your 1, and then let's multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. So negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Add, that's negative 3. Negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3. Add, it's negative 25. Negative 1 times negative 25 is 25. Add, that's 33. Negative 1 times 33 is negative 33. And once again, we see that's not going to add to 0, so it's not negative 1. So let's go to 2, and I'll just take it over here. 2 into 1, negative 2, negative 28, 8, and 96. All right. Bring down our 1, and now let's multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. 2 times 1 is 2. Add, we get 0. 2 times 0 is 0. Add, we get negative 28. 2 times negative 28 is negative 56. And add, we get negative 48. And then 2 times negative 48 is, yay, it's negative 96, which gives us a 0 in this last spot. Now realize that 0 always has to be in the last spot. Having a 0 here doesn't count. It's got to be right here. So 2 is a 0. Now, let's write down what we have left. We started with an x to the 4th. We now have 1x to the 3rd. This is a 0x squared, so we don't need to write a 0 in front of x squared. But we have a negative 28x. Careful that you don't call it x squared, because the x squared was with the 0. And then we have a negative 48. And actually, just to help us here, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go ahead and put that 0, because we'll see why in a second. And we won't leave something out. Negative 28x, negative 48. Now, typically we won't write that 0, but because we are still at x to the 3rd, we want to keep our division up. We want to keep dividing until we get to an x squared so that we can factor. So we need to do synthetic division again to find yet another 0. All right, so I'm going to continue in my list. I was at positive 2. Positive 2 was a 0. Let's go to negative 2, and let's divide further. So let's divide negative 2, but not into the beginning polynomial, into this one. So into 1, 0, negative 28, negative 48. So slightly shorter division now. Bring down the 1. And let's multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. So negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Add the column, we get negative 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Add the column, we get negative 24. Negative 2 times negative 24 is 48. And we have found a second 0. All right, so our second 0 is negative 2. Now, we were dividing into something that started with x cubed, so now we're down to an x squared in our answer. This is 1x squared minus 2x minus 24. Okay, we can factor this. Factors of negative 24 that add to minus 2 will be, let's see, a negative 6 and a positive 4. So let's pick off our zeros. We have a 6 and a negative 4. And then let's go ahead and list the 2 that we had up here, negative 2 and positive 2. 2 and negative 2. There's all of our zeros. Now let's notice also, though, that it asks us to factor. All right, so we have 2 factors, x minus 6 and x plus 4. And then let's add the other factors. If we list this as a factor, remember the factor is opposite of the 0. So x minus 2 is the factor that goes with the positive 2. And then for a negative 2, we need x plus 2. So now we have all the factors of our polynomial, and we have their zeros below. Now, let me just note that if you have trouble factoring, you can keep doing synthetic division to find your last factors. So, if you get to this point right here and you have trouble factoring, just keep dividing until you find another 0, and then you'll be left with one factor left, which you can pick your 0 off of. So you can really keep doing synthetic division, but it takes a long time if you just keep doing synthetic division.